it becomes impossible to correlate the sound with the slow motion picture. However, the recorded sound will be reproduced during each sequence. The noise of the camera may be heard in the background while it exposes 100 feet of film in 1 second. We have chosen this sound because it demonstrates a firm closure of the larynx with an abrupt release in one continuous rapid motion. While you may not recognize it in isolation, all of us produce this type of sound frequently to initiate a vowel. Singers have termed it coup de glotte. Note the motion of the vocal cords on their release. It is this motion which produces the first sound. While our patient repeated the sound several times at the beginning of the sequence for identification, you realize, of course, that the entire complex scene portrays just one sound. By now, the arytenoids have separated, and the exaggerated motion of the cords produces little or no sound. Note the marked relaxation of the cords and their flabby appearance. While this film does not reproduce as well as the standard color film, these pictures represent a new development in slow-motion photography of the larynx, color photography. Our next sound is a slow glide from low to high pitch. These pictures are taken from the beginning of the film, where the pitch is low. Note the massive chords and the wide amplitude of each movement. This is characteristic of low pitch. The large globule of mucus appears to have no effect on the quality of the sound. This view represents a slightly higher pitch from the latter part of the same film strip. The vocal cords have lengthened somewhat, while the amplitude of the vibration has decreased. This is characteristic of the higher pitch range. The study of additional details of vocal cord behavior at ultra-slow motion requires the use of black and white film. Our first sequence shows laryngeal function at low pitch. Again, we observe the thickness of the vocal cords and the amplitude of the vibration, which are typical of the low tone range. In addition, we discover that the free margin of each vocal cord is not the thin linear structure we visualized before, but rather a thick shelf with upper and lower lips. The intricate motion of these lips suggests some basic changes from the traditional concept of laryngeal function. The next two series will present a brief glimpse of isolated, medium, and high-pitch sounds. Note the increasing length of the cords and the decrease in amplitude. You have just heard an octave glide. Within that brief time, many major laryngeal adjustments occur. In the lower ranges, the cords are shortened, massive, and relaxed. The vibrations are relatively slow. Observe here that the cords are elongating rapidly. As the pitch rises, they become tense and narrow. This lengthening of the vocal cords with rise in pitch seems a paradox, since a physical law maintains that the length of a vibrator is directly proportional to the frequency of vibration. While it is true that the larger male larynx produces lower tones than the smaller female larynx, lengthening of the cords in the same individual increases their elasticity and decreases their cross-sectional mass. This combination increases the frequency of vibration, which is associated with higher pitch. With the rise in pitch, the vocal cord movements of the patient have become slightly asynchronous. This is not uncommon and causes no apparent change in voice. Maximum lengthening of the cords for the octave glide has now occurred. The vocal cords are vibrating twice as fast as they did earlier in the scene. You will now be in a position to observe the complex laryngeal adjustments in reverse order as the pitch is lowered. The normal vibratory cycle consists of 3 separate phases: the opening, the closure, and the complete approximation. In the breathy voice pictured here, the last phase is eliminated. On the other hand, loudness increases the time of approximation. Whether the vibrations of the lateral laryngeal walls in the ventricular region influence the timbre of the voice, we do not know. We believe that the vigorous motion of the aryepiglottic folds is simply a byproduct of the vocal effort. The blood vessels on the surface of the cords mark the progression of the vibratory movement. The small collection of mucus at the posterior commissure indicates the nature of the movements in that area. As the pitch decreases more and more, we again note the thick double lip contour of the free borders of the vocal cords. This finding confirms the traditional concept of massive approximation in the lower pitch range. It is equally interesting to observe the sequence of events as the cords separate in abduction. Contrary to traditional teaching, the vocal cords separate first, to be followed by the vocal processes of the arytenoid cartilages. The abduction is then completed by lateral movement of these cartilages. This is a view of the larynx during inhalation and at the beginning of the multiple muscular adjustments which produce a coup de glotte. As the arytenoids approach each other, observe the smooth movement without rotation. The tremendous energy with which the arytenoids crash together in this type of phonation is revealed clearly in the compression of the vocal processes. After this posterior approximation, the soft tissues of the larynx close very rapidly. Note the sphincteric action of the supraglottic structures. The arytenoids advance forward and mesially. The ventricular folds and their surroundings shift toward the midline, and the anterior structures, primarily the epiglottis, move posteriorly. The release of this constriction is even more sudden and dynamic than the closure. The lateral and anterior parts of the larynx return to their customary open positions, but the arytenoids remain approximated to adjust for phonation. The overhanging epiglottis and the sphincteric action of the supraglottic structures prevent complete visibility of the first few vibrations during the release of a coup de glotte. It is evident, however, that the vocal cords are squeezed tightly together during several vibratory cycles. The coup de glotte resembles a cough, with one important variation. When a cough is released, the arytenoids abduct instantly to pull the cords apart and thus open the airway. In the coup de glotte, however, the arytenoids remain together to ready the vocal cords for phonation. We have seen that the entire larynx participates in the production of sound, not only the vocal cords. This short strip reveals the motion of the arytenoids and interarytenoid areas during phonation. Similarly, a cough affects every part of the larynx. What a violent eruption! Every particle is shaking. The epiglottis, the aryepiglottic folds, the true cords, and the associated soft tissues and cartilages. This extreme effort was reserved not for its sound effect, but for the protection and self-preservation of the individual. The human larynx, what a range of sound! What variety of function! How simple in appearance! How complex in its action! How beautiful and delicate in its effect! And how strong and powerful in its protection!